Out of focus?
No, it wasn't straight.
Okay. So, Ellerby Creek Watershed, I work with the School of Science and Math. That's a wonderful school. I'm glad North Carolina has that program. And I went to the students, and they do what's called mini-term, and they spend 10 days researching one topic, and then they do a presentation on that topic. So I worked with them to create some rain gardens at School of Science and Math, and also design some cisterns where they could collect all the water coming off that campus. And instead of using potable water to irrigate their athletic fields, that they could use giant cisterns underground to capture that runoff. So it was a great group of kids, very smart. But in this one particular project, we had the Royal parking lot, which is kind of the admin building of the school. And that parking lot had a lot of runoff, and so we had a competition within the student body to design a rain garden. And the rain garden design not only had to be just, plant species and aesthetic value, but it also had to meet the engineering requirements for the area we're capturing. So this is a little bit different from what I talked to you about. It's about 6,000 square feet of parking lot. So in a 1-inch rain, how many gallons would come off of it? Okay. So before they had a rain garden, you could see all the runoff was cutting erosion right down the street and then running in that blue line path. And I always tell people, it's nice when I can visit your property, but boy, if you could share some photos of your property during a storm event, that is really helpful to me. I mean, I can look at topo maps, I can look at soil maps, I can look at storm drains, and I have a pretty good eye for seeing things that are happening, but man, pictures worth 1,000 words. And so this is what we had, a muddy mess on the street. What is that stuff called that's on the sidewalk? Sediment. And then it's being delivered to storm drains, delivered to Ellerby Creek. So we did a competition, made observations, and we looked to notice that there was concentrated flow. And concentrated flow is the big problem we have when we go in and change places. Forest, there's trees. There may be flow during a raining event, but it's not concentrated. But everything we do as human beings, we tend to like to concentrate flow. So that whole 6,000 square foot came down to an 18-inch area. So did anybody do the math on the 6,000 square foot for me? How many? Nobody did the math? So 6,000
times 600.
Yeah, times
30.
Yes, about 3,600 gallons, 4,000 gallons, coming off of a little strip, all flowing down that one area. So, is all stormwater bad? Is all runoff bad? No. So there's a term that we use, connected. Connected means that impervious runoff is flowing across a vegetated area that's at least 30 feet long, that has at least 80% of the ground covered. So if stormwater runoff flows across 30 feet of vegetation, that 80% of the soil is covered with actively, vigorously growing vegetation, then we do not consider it connected. It's not bad stormwater, because what are those plants doing? They're absorbing that nitrogen. So if that vegetated area is less than 50% covered, then what is that runoff doing? Well, it's pulling that soil away, because plants hold soil in place. So to be good stormwater, Good stormwater flows across 30 feet or more of vegetation that is heavily vegetated. More than 80% of the soil is covered. You cannot see the soil. Okay? Bad stormwater doesn't meet those criteria. So you have stormwater. We don't know if it's connected or not connected right now at this moment. And when I go do a site visit, that's what I'm looking for. Is it a water quality concern or is it okay? Okay, so just because you want a rain garden doesn't mean you need one for water quality purposes. It may be okay. So that's the key thing about, is there a water quality concern? So the other key thing, soils. Okay, you remember 30 feet of vegetation, at least 80% of that soil is covered with vegetation. But also, what is the soil environment? Because remember, 80% of what falls in the forest infiltrates. So in that vegetated area, and we have actively growing vegetation, is there infiltration? Is there a potential to dig a hole and collect more water? So we do a soil test, and you dig a hole 12 by 12, 18 by 18, and 2 feet deep, and you fill it with water. And this is the infiltration test. But before you do that, locate utilities.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. They do it for free. So have the utilities located, and then do your test holes. So I'm thinking about a rain garden, and I'm going to put it over here. So I'm going to do one test hole, at least 1 by 1 by 1.5 feet or 2 feet. Or do you think I should do a few? Probably do a few. You don't want to bank all this investment and project into one test hole. So I would say 3, 4, 5. You know, if you're going to dig a rain garden, it's not that hard to dig a few test holes because you have to dig that deep anyway. So you might as well see how easy it is to dig. And so then you fill the hole with water. So if I dig my test hole today and they're calling for rain tomorrow, I guess that's okay because it'll probably fill up tomorrow. But ideally, you want to monitor that soil and that infiltration for at least 5 days with no rain event. So I guess if you ran home today, dug some test holes and it rained tomorrow and it filled up, then you could watch it for 4 or 5 days to see if it infiltrates. Okay? And then if it drains in less than 3 days, then fill it up again and see what happens. See if it drains again in 3 days. So this is just a picture of a test hole, bucket of water, fill it up. So what happens if that hole is not dry in 3 days? Or what do you think we should do? Okay, we've got 3 test holes. I want to do a rain garden, but you know what? Day 4, there's water in it. No infiltration. Are the infiltrations maybe not what we want it to be? Because what happens on day 7 in a hole of water? Hole full of water? Mosquitoes. Are we in the mosquito business or the rain garden business? Rain garden business. So we want our rain garden to be dry on day 4, no later than day 5. Because how many plant species do you work with that can handle wet feet for a week at a time? You know, you're killing them with kindness. You know, you can't water too much. Watering too much is just as bad as not watering enough.
Well, there are water plants, but then it's how.
But that's a pond. We're not building ponds.
How do you get the dry time?
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. You're right.
We're building rain gardens. We're not building wetlands. We're not building ponds. That's another BMP. It is another practice that if your soils are not suitable for a rain garden, we can do a wetland. But keep in mind what wetlands are. They're places full of water, have mosquitoes and critters. Okay, so if you want one, then build one. But just understand what you're getting. So here are some considerations. So our manual indicates that no rain garden can be sited within 10 feet of a structure. Okay, why would that be the case? Right, we don't want water infiltration under the foundation, into the crawl space. We don't want excessive water at the footing, compromising the structural integrity of the foundation, causing cracks in your walls. So minimum 10 feet away. How many of you have well or septic tanks? Most people, a few. So you want to make sure you're far, far away from wells and septics. And make sure there's no underground utilities. Ideally, part sun or full sun, because most of the species that you see on the list are recommended sunny plants. We have to make sure that we're not in a flood-prone area. So, if you have a part of your yard that fills up with water during a rain event, and it takes it several days to flow away, and it does flow away, then do you want to hold it there any longer? No. So if that is already working, then don't mess with it. Sometimes, because of our nature, we don't want that water to sit there, so we pay a contractor to come in and put a drain box, and then we pipe that to the ditch. That's been the mentality. But if you have an area that is already heavy runoff, and when do you know if you have a drainage problem?
One would last for more than 3 days.
Say it again.
One would last for more than 3 days.
Or 24 hours, typically there's a drainage issue if water sits more than 24 hours. If it sits there for less than 3 days, but then dissipates, it may be a drainage issue, but it's not a water quality or infiltration issue. It's just a natural place in the environment where water pools and then it infiltrates, because infiltration is a good thing. That's why we have a thing called groundwater. And that's the people who have wells depend on groundwater. Streams depend on groundwater. It's when you get all the water away fast, that's when streams suffer. That's when groundwater suffers. So you want infiltration. And so if you have a place in your yard, heavy amount of water flow, and it pools for 1, 2, or 3 days, but then it goes away, that's a good thing, but don't turn it into a rain garden. And because you don't want to concentrate more water than that area is already handling. It's already handling the water, so you just have to use your judgment. So you basically want to be at least 10 feet away from a house, because again, we're more likely our rain garden is going to treat what type of runoff? Rooftop runoff. So we want to measure at least 10 feet, so tape measure. So we talked about this, first flush. So the standard is in that first ½ inch of the first inch of rainfall. That's when you have the first flush. That's a nutrient-rich water. So theoretically, and again, human beings know everything. So theoretically, if we capture the first 90% of the first flush, then we are capturing all the nitrogen runoff, and we can treat it. But if the old info research data was that 82% of rain events were less than an inch, then that means 82% of the time we would capture the first flush, and then 18% of the time be more than an inch. And so what do we have there? Our feature. Do we want to engineer something so big that we catch all the rain all the time? No, you'd spend a fortune. So all the subdivisions, what do you think their engineering equations are based upon when they design those bioretention areas? When you design your rain garden? That first flush in that 1 inch. So if it rains 2 inches, did we capture? No, we had a runoff event. So that's what the problem is. Engineering is based on, because in the day, just a few years ago, we thought that 82% of the rain events, we would capture them. But what we've seen the last few years, that's not really the case. Okay? So everything we're doing, if you're in the Piedmont, we use the 1 inch. If you're in the coast, they use the same formula, but the 1.5 inches. Because the majority of all the rain events on the coast are 1.5 inches, not 1 inch. Okay. Math. So how big is this rain garden? So you're all thinking about a rain garden at your house. Well, how big is it going to be? Well, we have to first measure the impervious area. So the first thing you're going to do is go home, get the ladder, and climb up on the roof. And then we got to measure the pervious area. So what was pervious area? Okay, so how close is the rain garden to my house? At least 10 feet. So is rain falling out of the sky in that 10 foot? Is that 10 foot draining away from the house towards the rain garden? Yeah. So that's all the pervious area. So you have to look at the site and say, okay, I might be focused on this roof, but where in my yard is coming to this point too? And how big an area is that? Okay, so then we get the total of impervious and pervious runoff. So we have to engineer this based on those two numbers. So what happens if we just guess instead of actually measuring? It's not going to be sized right, I can tell you how much. So I'm going to show you, we're going to go on GoMax here in just a moment, and I'm going to show you how to measure without measuring on site. What I typically do is I review a parcel before I even go to the parcel on GoMax, and I review topography, soil, stormwater system, and I measure areas so that when I get there I have all that kind of in the back of my mind, and then I look at the site and then try to make recommendations. So at School of Science and Math, they had 6,390 square feet. They had 1,278 square feet total drainage area, over 7,000 square feet. They had an impervious percentage of that runoff at 83%. So 83% of what they were going to collect was impervious. So we're going to come up with a calculation of what percentage is impervious and what percentage is pervious. And then the runoff volume or the runoff coefficient. So when you run the math, and I'm going to show you, I'm not going to jump deep into the math right now, but when you run the math, we determine there's 511 cubic feet in that 1 inch rain event coming off that parking lot. So that meant that the rain garden, if it was a 6 inch depth, had to be 1,024 square feet. It's a big one. Yes.
Is impervious and impermeable interchangeable? Are those interchangeable words?
Yes. Yep. So we'll get deeper into these other calculations. And so again, we were trying to get our impervious percentage, which we came up with 83%, and then 17% was the pervious. But before we get off into calculating runoff coefficients and all that kind of stuff, what I'd like to do, and I might need your help, is to get back to GIS if we can. Because if you haven't used this tool, you should. Everybody have a computer? Not today, but well, it's going to be that easy. Huh?
You're always optimistic. We'll get there.
Hey, there it is. So she went to GoMax.
I just Googled GoMaps.
Google GoMax.
Yeah.
And she put in this address. And you see down at the bottom, when you put in an address, you get results. And when I was kidding about finding out about people, this is all the tax office detail. So everything about your parcel is right down here on these links. Your parcel ID number, all your tax info, it's all public record. Oh, I didn't mean to go there. Shows you pictures, everything. If there were pictures of your property done during an assessment, it's all there, public information. So I want to go back. I want to close this out. So I'm going to try that. I'm going to get back to here. Thank you, Ashley. And I'm going to get rid of that because I'm not interested in whether you paid your taxes and how much you pay and what your rate is and what your house looks like. But that's all out there. But what I want to do is I want to look at map layers. This is called a street view, and I don't like street view. I want to see imagery. So now that helps. And then what else do I want? Well, look at all the things I can do. But I spend a lot of time on stormwater. And then when I open up stormwater, I can look at the region, so I can identify the watershed right off the bat. I can look at stormwater channels, control features. So does my neighborhood have a bioretention that was built in 2007? Well, if you call your property up and you click those features, it should come up. So then the other thing is topography and surface water. So I like to click surface water. So it shows you hydrologic polygons. That's a fancy way of saying waterways. So all the hydrologic units, whether it's a ditch, a river, a stream, unknown, ponds. So click on that. And then clicking on topo, 2 foot and 10 foot. So we're zoomed in on this building. So that's kind of a neat tool. We'll go to another property. Someone gave me their address. They were not knowing what I was going to do with it. But then I have measurement tools. So I'm not used to this computer, so give me a break. So measurements, distance, area. So I want to measure an area on this map in square feet. Okay. So in particular, how much runoff are we collecting? How much area is that cistern collecting right there. So because I have helped other master gardeners, I somewhat know. Let's see, are we measuring? Oh, I'm trying to get used to this trackpad, excuse me. I'm not seeing that it's collecting. Okay, so area. It should be drawing my area. What is happening here? Let's just try distance for a second. Don't you love it when a tool doesn't work? Okay, let's go back to measurements. Let's go back to area. Click the area button. I like to follow directions to activate the tool. Okay.
You ended up in a dead end.
Okay, so for some reason, the area button is not functioning. I don't know if it's measurements, area.
Do you want me to see if I can get it while you explain what should happen?
Yeah, so what should happen is I should be able to just come in here and click and draw and then double click and it show how many square feet it is. And let's just go somewhere else. Maybe it just doesn't like where we are. So I should be able to go to address. Let's see. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I might need your help in just a minute. Let's just try to start over. Okay. We're just going to say GoMax Durham. See, it came up, GoMax Durham. We're just going to try to interactive maps 4.0 is what it is. So we're going to go to there. Believe me, I use this all the time. And so GoMaps 4.0. Okay, then it comes up. So I just thought maybe restarting, maybe it was open too long or something was happening. And I have someone's address here. Is it Hillgrand Drive?
Yes.
Oh, let me back up. What's not happening here? $3900. Nothing's happening. There we go. You see it starts pulling up addresses right away. And then boom, there's her address. So now we're going to go. Okay, we're going to zoom in on our tax record. No, today, not today. But we're going to go to map layers and I want to get the latest imagery. And then again, I want to zoom down and click stormwater. And then topo. What is all this stuff at the bottom? I don't know what all that is. Okay, so then I'm going to zoom in. I've highlighted my layers, and then I want to zoom in on the parcel. I'm assuming this is the address. Ah. This trackpad is giving me fits. Okay. So I'm going to zoom in on this roof area again. Now, let's go back to tools. This is really bizarre. I have not seen it act this way. See, and when we had it open just a moment ago, let's go to this one here. We're going to do measurement. We're going to do area. We're going to do square footage. We're going to click on area. And we're going to try to come over, and I'm going to try to measure this segment of the roof. And it's not measuring.
Blue square down bottom left.
Yeah.
On the next one, that's it.
It clears after you, so you measure an area. I was trying to zoom in on her roof and measure this segment of roof, assuming that she had a corner downspout, just so I could show you how to use this tool. And I just love it when the tool's not working.
That way you can just use that corner of the house with that corner of the roof, right?
Yeah, so you can see that you can pull your measurements for the size of your rain garden off of the GIS. And it could be that the browser that we're using is not allowing us to use all the tools effectively. I don't know what browser we're using. So GoMax, when it works, it's free. Did anyone in here go and pull the place up? You did?
In Raleigh, I'm using iMaps, and I got the layers, and I can click them all on. They aren't showing up, so.
Okay, so
I have layers up on mine that look like they show the elevation and where the stormwater runs off.
yes. So typically when you go in and you click these layers, then they do show up. And that's the other thing that's not happening here,
Yeah, it's not happening.
is the layers are not showing up. And I especially wanted to go to her property because she said they were doing work on a stormwater drain and a stream. So I'm trying to zoom out now. Yeah, so we're not having much luck on that. Oh well. You can still go spy on your neighbors. Okay. So we're going to get out of that, and we're going to try to go back to PowerPoint. Is it showing up behind me? Slideshow, and from current slide.
Here you go.
Okay, so we're back up on this. So the bottom line is you have to measure the area in which you're collecting runoff. So if you're going to do that on site with a measuring tape or wheel, or you're going to use GIS. Either way, you get a number. And then we have to calculate runoff volume. And I'm just going to race through this real quick because these are engineering equations. Any engineering here want to take over? So basically, our runoff volume is our percentage of the impervious area that we're collecting water off of. And so what percentage of runoff can we expect from an impervious area? 95%. Yeah, so this equation basically just eliminates that 5%, and so now we have that runoff value equation, and then we get deep into engineering, so we've got the runoff volume percentage times the area times the rainfall event, and then that gives us, in that equation, that tells us how many cubic feet of water we're going to have. So how many gallons are in a cubic foot? 7.5, 7.6. So this does it in cubic feet. Why cubic feet? Because we're digging a hole. We're going to dig a hole and we're going to catch water. And so we have to know what the cubic foot is. So, do you want to do all this math?
No.
Well, when I went to school of science and math, they said, Mr. Dupree, we're going to do a spreadsheet. I said, you are? Yeah, we're going to give it to you. So let me find my spreadsheet. Here we go. And it's yours now too. So they made this spreadsheet for me. Or can you see it? No. We'll get there. I guess I should look behind me, but I knew you ran up here.
Yeah.
Where's my mirror? Driving without a mirror. So. Only engineers like math. Is that a true statement?
No.
We all like to count money, but only engineers truly love math. So, this trackpad. Okay. So, this is pretty easy. All you have to know is how many square feet of impervious, how many square feet of pervious, and how deep you want your rain garden to be. So if I just plug in 1,200 square feet of roof that I was trying to measure, I was going to actually measure, and then I was going to actually measure the yard, and let's just say that was 460 square feet. And I want my rain gardens are at a depth anywhere from 3 inches, 6 inches, 9 inches, 12 inches, but rarely are rain gardens more than 12 inches deep. So right now it says 0.25, but I'm going to change that to 0.5 to make it a 6-inch deep rain garden. So as soon as I do that, voila, my rain garden is 194 square feet at 6 inches deep. That's easy math. I like that kind of math. But, yeah, so, go kids, go. So then they went a step further, and they did all the calculations to determine how many square feet you would be excavating, how much mulch you would need, if you were doing sand in a 2-foot depth, how much you would need, and then how many plants they recommend at 1 plant per square foot. Love those kids. So, and then this was some totals that we put in based upon potential reimbursement of the program many years ago. So this spreadsheet is available for you, or you can go do all the math.
When you say
Okay.
6 inches deep, is that the 6 inches of material below the soil surface?
So we're going to talk about that in just a moment when we do install. So this is how you design one. This is the easy plug 3 number method. So what the state produced, I'm trying to get back to, and I may need you again. Trying to escape from this. So can anybody remember our numbers from the last spreadsheet? Can you see the new spreadsheet? Okay. So, state has a spreadsheet, it's a little bit different. So they divide roof and transportation impervious into different categories. Our roof impervious was 1,200. Our managed pervious, what's the difference between managed pervious and wooded pervious?
Man-made versus nature-made.
Yeah, so if it's forest, trees, there's less likely to be nutrients, less likely to be runoff. If it's managed, turf, probably more runoff. So they have the equations all built in. So we're going to call it, what was it, 460 square feet? And so we plug those numbers in. And then here, ponding depth, that's a 3-inch ponding depth. We're going to make a 6-inch ponding depth. And we're capturing a 1-inch rain event. So this spreadsheet came up with 193.83333 square feet, and the other one was 194. They're in agreement. But what this one does, oh, that's a buffer. I have to change this to bioretention. And I want it to be 100% of recommended size. So, if I built that rain garden, I would remove 0.16 pounds of nitrogen a year, 0.01 pounds of phosphorus, and reduce sediment delivery by 7.55 into infinity in sediment delivery. So both of these spreadsheets tell you the size of the rain garden based upon the data you put in, 3 or 4 cells. It does all the math for you. So whether you use the state's spreadsheet that calculates your nutrient reduction, or you use the School of Science and Math to calculate your mulch and plants and all those things, these are 2 great tools that you can use to design your rain garden at home.
What was the address for this one?
Oh, the spreadsheet was sent.
Yeah. So all this to be shared. So now I have to try to get back to my rain garden. Do I have it open? Here it is. There we go. And so, GoMax works. I use it all the time.
I got it working.
You got it working? Was it the browser or?
No, I was using Google Chrome, but I used my parents' home and I was able to calculate the square footage of it.
Okay. So the other neat thing about GoMaps is all your stormwater drains are indicated.
Yeah.
All the waterways are indicated. So, I mean, if you live in a subdivision that has a bioretention, you would see it. You would see that all the storm drains are tied to that bioretention. So, again, a typical rain garden design is an excavated area, and the question came up just a moment ago, what our ponding depth is. So, all rain gardens should have at least 3 inches of mulch. So you have to add that 3 inches to your excavation depth. So if you want a 6-inch ponding depth, you do 9 inches excavation. So if you want a 12-inch ponding depth, you would do a 15-inch excavation. But I don't recommend 12-inch depth unless what test results came back and that were just so phenomenal you thought, I'll do 12-inch plumbing depth. Your infiltration. If your infiltration test holes come back and that water drains out quickly, then you might want to consider it. As what happens when you increase the depth? You get smaller. So maybe you don't want a 200 square foot rain garden. Maybe you only want a 100 square foot rain garden. Well, just increase your depth if you can. Is a rain garden more likely to fail if it's deeper? Yes. Because the more water, the more chance of failing, right, over an area. So again, they ran the numbers, but on this, make sure GoMax is working. It's not listed on here, but it's here. But yeah, get your measurements and calculate the size of the rain garden. So you'll have 2 spreadsheets that you can use that are really easy. So then we're going to go to installation here. So how much time do we have?
We have about 3 minutes.
You won't mind if we stop early.
No.
So installation. I don't know whether I have my filter. But so we're going to excavate. So what I recommend is we did our math. We know what size depth we're going to do because of infiltration. And so I like to paint it out. And what you can do with is take a garden hose and kind of lay the garden hose out and get it the shape you want, and then get your measuring tape and say, is it the right size? And then take a can of the spray paint and paint around the garden hose. And then you have a nice outline. So then you do your excavation and you go to the depth that you need, and not everyone has a laser level. Do you have your laser level? Have you had it checked?
Yeah.
Is it that critical? I mean, it's somewhat critical if I'm cost sharing it, but I'm bringing a laser level and I'm going to check it. But if I'm not cost sharing it, what's going to happen if you don't have your depth right? You're not going to have the capacity. It messes up all your calculations. So laser level is an easy way of checking that. And so then you basically, question is, do I add a soil amendment or not? Well, if you add a soil amendment, you're adding material, so did your calculations include a soil amendment? That's something you have to decide. So if you're going to incorporate organic material into the base of the rain garden, you have to make sure that those cubic yards of material were part of your calculations. Otherwise, you just threw the math off. And then you have to have 3 inches of mulch. You don't often mulch rain gardens, usually once every 3rd or 4th year. So you want to start off with a decent layer of mulch for those plants. So some larger systems that this was in front of now I'm on King's Daughter Inn. Yeah, we did a big rain garden in front of their place. And we went to the 3-foot depth. And when you do a 3-foot depth, you definitely, in this part of the country, want to use 2 feet of sand. Because you're going to be In this particular rain garden, we were treating 10,000 square feet of roof area. And so we needed that extra volume capacity in that rain garden in that 2 feet of sand area.
Is it shady all day there?
Yes, it's part sun situation. Yeah. So if you walk past King's Daughters Inn, you'll see the big rain garden out in front. And they also have a underground cistern where they use the water to flush commodes in the building. So they're harvesting water and they have the rain garden. So not quite 100% of their runoff is treated, but we were like 90%, pretty close. And so this is basically showing the massive excavation and then the sand fill material, then the topsoil additive, and then the plants installed. This is the School of Science and Math. Because of the slope, we had to have 2 tiers in the rain garden. So if you remember the corner of the parking lot where there was concentrated flow, that goes into the upper tier. And the reason all this fabric is there is we got caught by a summer storm right in the middle of excavation. So to prevent a huge runoff mess, we covered everything with fabric, put some silk fence up. But you don't put fabric in the rain. I went to a rain garden recently and they thought it was a good idea to put in cardboard boxes in the bottom to keep the weeds down. It's like, no, it's not a good idea. Didn't allow infiltration. So they had to go back, take all the plants out, take all the mulch out, pull all the cardboard out, and redo it. So no fabric, no cardboard. All you want is sand or soil limit. So there was about 50 kids in the Greener Vision Club. So the school came in, we marked utilities, they brought the excavator in, did the major excavation, and then the students did the final install, and we created a berm on the lower side and planted that berm in variety. So you can see the upper tier and kind of the lower tier being installed. That center berm, we did leave fabric on the center berm because we wanted it to get stabilized with plant material, and then we could go in and cut that fabric out. So it was kind of protecting us because we were dealing with 511 cubic feet of water. So you can imagine all that water coming down at one time. So that center berm, we left the fabric in for the first year just to help the plants get their roots in the ground, then we cut it. So that was the final product. I think that was 4 years ago. So this is more in line with what you might have at your home, where you have a residential rain garden. So again, you kind of lay out. We used garden hose with the landowner, laid out, and then we put the paint and stakes. So you can see these little grade stakes. And the grade stakes are just kind of used to demark the outer edge, but on the lower side where you're building a berm. Not all rain gardens need a berm. But if you do have a slope and you do have to build a berm, well, how high is the berm? Well, the berm is at least 3 inches higher than the pool of water, ideally 6 inches. So you can use a grade stake to drive that stake in the ground, use your laser level, drive it to the height of the berm, and then you just build the berm up to the top of the stake. So the grade stake is an easy way of keeping track of that. So that's what we did with a group of high school kids. We finished the excavation, got it to the depth that we needed, and we took the soil out because we had a little bit of a slope and built the berm up to the approximate height that it needed to be. Then you go in and do your planting, do your mulching. That was the finished product, so I didn't like the fact that the landowner wanted cedar mulch. I like cedar mulch, but cedar mulch floats. And
Unless you buy some new stuff.
pine bark mulch floats. The reason it's hardwood is hardwood doesn't float. I'm not a big fan of hardwood when it comes to growing plant material, but in a rain garden, it's a good idea. So you can see the pipe inlet. That's the roof area we're now treating. And what is the control overflow point? What's it called? Weir. The weir. So what you do is you line that. You can line that piece of it with a little fabric, with some gravel, some decorative stone. And the top of the weir should be at least 6 inches above or 3 inches above the pool. And the top of the berm should be at least 3 inches higher than the weir. And that's all on the diagrams that you have. Yes?
So start with the site after you excavate. I'm lost as to how you know how much sand to put in, how much soil to put in on top of the sand before you plant it.
Yeah. So you engineer, you size it. You're either going to have, what's your ponding depth going to be? 3 inches, 6 inches, 9 inches, or 12 inches. So that's the first thing you have to decide. So I'm a big fan of 3-inch ponding depths. What's the difference between a 3-inch ponding depth and a 6-inch ponding depth on a rain garden? 3 inches, twice the size. So do you have that much real estate? So,
You want more surface. You like more surface. Like,
so the thing is you've got to have, a suitable site, and you have to know the very thing you're asking, I believe, is how do I know what my depth is? Well, your depth is your ponding depth you ran on your calculation. And so if you excavate that soil and there's not proper infiltration, but when you already know that, because what did you do before? You did an infiltration test. You dug a hole 1.5 to 2 feet deep. You filled it with water, not once, but twice. You watched it drain. So if you did not have adequate drainage, but you still have to put a rain garden there because it's required by law, then you put 2 feet of soil amendment because that's the requirement by law. So the fine distinction between a rain garden and a bioretention is that 2 feet of sand.
so is
I think I mentioned that once earlier, but that is a key point, I think, of what you're trying to get at.
So if your site drains adequately, you're not putting any sand in.
Right. If you
Are
can,
you planting on the soil that's exposed by the excavation?
Yes.
Or are you adding
Yes.
soil?
and if you're going to amend that soil, you have to make sure that's part of your calculation. Yes.
What happens if you use gravel instead of sand for that?
Well, gravel increases drainage. There's a company, trying to remember the name. They sell 2 products commonly on the market. One is for vole control. The slate product, what is that called?
Stanley?
The Permatil. That same company near Liberty, North Carolina, is where they mine that product. A&T University used that Permatil-like material as the amendment instead of sand. The problem with that is you actually get more water holding capacity with sand than you do with rock. For vegetation perspective. It's vice versa for just water holding, but with sand, you get better capillary root action with your plant material growing into the sand versus with the rock, because it's a finer granule.
So amendment in your use of the word refers to the layer, if you need to put it in at the bottom of the rain garden.
Right.
not something you mix in with more. And there's a ratio, if you have to use sand, of
10%. Well, sand.
of sand to mulch.
There's
or
two questions.
Dirt, or I mean dirt, soil. What goes on top of it?
Yeah.
Sorry,
So there's.
I didn't say the D word.
So there's two things I think you're asking. Number one is, why do I need sand? And if I need sand, there's 2 feet of sand. And then number two is, should I amend the existing soil? And the recommendation of the state is pine fines
Okay.
at a 10% soil ratio. And so if I'm excavating, 12 inches deep, and I want to add soil amendment, and I'm going to have a 9-inch ponding depth, but I'm going to have a 10% pine bark, you just have to do the math.
Yeah.
And get your,
So if it's only a 3-inch,
and then you'll put 3 inches of mulch in.
but if it's only a 3-inch rain garden,
If it's only a 3-inch rain garden,
you're probably not going to need sand anyway.
you're probably not going to need sand. And the advantage of a 3-inch rain garden, 3-inch ponding depth, yeah, so chances are in our soils in Durham, you'll get better infiltration with a 3-inch ponding depth than a 6 or a 9 or a 12.
Is there a Wake County, do you have a Wake County counterpart?
There's soil and water in every district in the state of North Carolina.
So you
So
exist
every
in every
county.
county.
So Wake County Soil and Water has somebody like me,
What is your name, I'm sorry?
Mike.
Mitch is still here, but
Mitch is.
Mike's name needs to be in there now.
You'll get my name,
Yeah, and I'll
and
give
you'll
you
get
some
all my
information
PowerPoints
today and everything,
Thank you.
so
and my spreadsheets. Yes.
An average 3-inch rain garden, just an average one, what would the cost be? Any idea? If you didn't use big equipment.
It's easy. So there's something that we started doing, there's a group of us, started doing rain gardens that are sodded. So we don't put plants and, well, sod is plant, but we don't use perennials or woodies. We use turf. So we go in and excavate and amend the soil, and we do a 3-inch ponding depth and lay Bermuda or zoysia turf. And then and we actually did one at North Street HOA, which we could walk there and look at. But they didn't want to take up a big space for a rain garden when they had so little space for kids to play, and so it's turf most of the year, except for that 3 days after the rain event, it has a little bit of water.
Yeah.
And so that's a good idea too, is to just do a shallow rain garden, amend the soil and lay sod. And then you can mow it, you can play on it. So what are the rules on rain gardens and edibles? According to the state, you can grow edibles in your rain garden. You should just wash your veggies before you eat them. And I know several people that have grown blueberries in rain gardens, but you have to have really good infiltration to grow blueberries in a rain garden. But you can grow edibles in the rain garden. Some bulletproof plants that are great for rain gardens are iris, daylilies. Those are wonderful. And we did one on Broad Street right across from School of Science and Math, and it had liriope, daylilies, and a Japanese maple in the center. And it turned out really pretty because you had some evergreen, and then you had the beautiful maple during most of the growing season. So, I mean, they are an engineered solution to get you to recycle your stormwater. That's the main purpose. So, one of many.
Thank you very much. This was
No, you
wonderful.
bet.
This was wonderful.
So, I think there's a piece of paper, or you're going to send an email with my contact info, and then I'm going to have, how many site visits?